Hello, everyone. Welcome into today's session, Leading Through Ambiguity, Turning Uncertainty into Strategic Advantage, presented by our Director of Business Solutions here at Educate 360 and Watermark Learning, Dr. Susan Heidorn. My name is Mariela, and I will be assisting in moderating today's session. We are on Zoom for today's session, and we will be emailing you a copy of this recording in an email after the webinar. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for a short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 and Watermark Learning are so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I'll hand it right over to you, Dr. Heidorn.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that, Mariella. And happy Tuesday to wherever you are from and whatever hour it is. So thank you for joining us. We are going to talk about leading through ambiguity. And doesn't it seem like that's a constant? So when I'm talking about ambiguity, you're thinking about, okay, there's lots of changes going on. Maybe roles have changed. There's maybe been layoffs. Decisions may be stalled, or we don't even know who makes the decisions in organizations. There's no ownership. There is just a lot of stuff going on. And it's like, how do we as leaders get through all of it? It just comes at us fast and furious. We're trying to, walk on shifting sand and, figuring out how do we make decisions when we don't know things anymore? Life used to felt even, maybe this wasn't true, but it felt more certain. And now it's like, I don't know about you, but I feel like sometimes it's just crazy time. So I am going to go through, we're going to be talking about how to lead through ambiguity, how to help our teams be resilient, and hopefully give you a few things that you can take back to work to start using right away. And so we're going to first talk about what's the impact of ambiguity. It impacts our decision making, our team dynamics, our performance. It just, getting the ground set of going, what does this mean? Why should I care? And so that's our first section. Our second section is really going to be talking about how do you adapt as a leader? What are some of those strategies we can do? And when I'm talking about leadership, I'm not talking about the C Club. We can all be leaders. Some of us are managers, some of us are supervisors, some of us are directors. But how do we use some of these strategies, showing up as ourselves also as leader, and figuring out how to maneuver, how to make to work in this ambiguous time, if you will. And then how do we build resilience and alignment with teams? So those are the things that we're going to kind of cover in this hour, and that's probably quite a bit, but we do have some polls and stuff to also work on. So our first section here is really understanding the impact of ambiguity and kind of figuring out what's going on. So as we go through some of these slides, I want you to kind of think about, hey, is this going on in my organization? What do I need to think about? What do I need to tackle? But the first thing we need to do is I'm going to have you do a poll. And so Mariella is going to launch this poll, and I'm curious about how do you currently feel about ambiguity? Because we have a lot more uncertainty. Uncertainty kind of brings stress, and it's just like, what do I do about this? So I'm just curious. I'd love everybody to put in, do the poll in the chat. Just want to know where you're coming from. This is anonymous, so nobody's going to report on you. Just kind of, and be honest on how you feel. Are you excited going, something new, something, is coming at us all the time. This is really exciting. Are you like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. It's just like, oh, please stop the gerbil wheel. Neutral, it is what it is, or, it kind of depends on the situation. So, um, Mariella, they said the host and panelists, oh, can't vote. Okay, I got it. So I haven't seen any results yet, so I'll just wait until most everybody's in. But love to hear. There's no right or wrong answer, just trying to get a temperature of the audience. Where are you today?
Alrighty,
How are you
and
feeling?
here are the results.
Wow, look at that. Depends on the situation, very flexible. I like that. Neutral. Some of us are a little overwhelmed. I know it really kind of depends on the situation. I kind of agree. Some of you are so excited about ambiguity. That's bring it on, right? Bring it on. So thank you for that. That is awesome. So let's see where we need to be going here. Sorry, my mouse went crazy here. So we can talk about the new reality. Ambiguity is not temporary these days. It is constant, constant. And I'm thinking over my past life, my current life, and I've been around the block a couple times. And I always said, wow, there's just lots of changes going on. And yet every year it seems even more so. And now we have all these changes coming to us like at the speed of light. We have market shifts, we have AI disrupt. Everybody's, a lot of you are probably doing things with AI. Your companies are doing something with AI. You're trying to figure out what to do with AI. How are we supposed to use it? What are we supposed to do with that? Right? The layoffs that have occurred. And so now, we were always talking about doing more with less, and now we really have to do more with less. Things are coming at us at a constant, I wouldn't say constant, but consistency of change all the time. And that speed of change is outweighing the speed of planning. So I've been a project manager for a long time. And, we used to be able to plan for projects. I also did a lot of strategic planning. We would plan. When strategic planning, when I was first getting into it, if you could do a 10-year plan and then it went to 5-year plan. And I don't even think you can do a year plan now because things are changing so much. In project plans, Agile came in, and so that has provided us some flexibility. But we as leaders have to adopt in real time, so we can't keep using the existing things that worked before. It's like, okay, we used to be able to plan and foresee things happening, and now, things are happening maybe, you know, yesterday will be something different, or tomorrow will be something different than today. It's just really crazy. So that's our new reality. And how do we work with it? So as I was saying, traditional models are failing. We can't do a big project plan. A lot of times, some organizations are still doing waterfall, but mostly they've kind of gone to more of a, if they haven't gone full-blown agile, to a wagile approach. But realizing that things are changing. Rigid structures no longer work for us. We can't wait to make decisions saying, okay, well, I'm going to wait until all the data is in, and then we'll make a decision. And I totally agree with data-driven decision making. That was a big thing. And totally agree. It's like, I need the data first. And yet we can't wait for all the perfect data, all the data, because we'll never have it by the time we have to make that decision, and we have to make it, sometimes a little bit more proactive than we like, so that, 1 year roadmap that we go, here's what it's going to look like, it's outdated in 6 weeks because something new came along, and so it's really creating a challenge both for leaders and for their teams. It's like, this is just shifting. I thought we were going here. Now we're going here. What's happening? I know even in Educate 360, What one of the changes, of course, is that we purchase a lot of our companies. You can look behind me. And so a lot of our technology changed and a lot of, the people changed, people came, people went, mergers are always shifting people as well. There were layoffs, just because we didn't need to duplicate everything. I mean, there's just a lot of things going on. And I know even just talking to my colleagues, they're going, oh my God, I don't, how do I get through this? They're every day is something new. One day I'm supposed to do this, next day I'm supposed to do that. It's like, and then do my regular job on top of that. So we got to go, how do we now as leaders help that? For people constantly feeling like they're stressed, they're, overwhelmed. And I'm glad to note that a lot of you are kind of, excited, bring it on. Which is really cool. And then it depends, but it does depend how much of the impact is on me, on my team, on others around me, because that can create some havoc as well. So the impact of ambiguity is just, how do we make decisions? Decisions are going to be slower because we keep thinking about, okay, I need the data, which totally agree. But it's going to be slower because either we might not have the data, or by the time we get the data, that data has changed. Our customers were excited about us. Well, tomorrow they may not be as excited about us. Their expectations working with our company is different. Think about your own expectations when you purchase something, you know, is you want it immediately? You purchase something today that maybe doesn't, meet your needs tomorrow. It's like, well, we used to want this. Now we want that. Service, same thing. People want quicker, faster service. And how do we give that to them? There's confusion about roles. Who's doing what? I know we even feel at Educate 360 that it's just like, okay, we've merged some roles together, we merged some departments together. These people, this group moved to another group, reorganization. Maybe some of you are feeling that too. So there's confusion of who do I report to now? And so even I'm going to pick on Educate 360 a lot here, but I've worked here for 7 years now. We were one of the second ones purchased, and I've had four bosses. So it's and that's even getting quicker because I'm talking to some of my colleagues, and they go, they'll say something about their, talking to their boss and needing to talk to their boss, and it's Bill. And I go, well, I thought it was Sally. And they go, no, that was last week. Now it's Bill. And it's like, oh my gosh. Kind of figuring out who's doing what is, crazy. Reduce performance. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing anymore. And of course, that then increases stress, right? Stress for our teams. And that stress is going to come out of ourselves, of our team members, and what do we do with that? What do we do with that? And so, making sure, because we don't want to make the wrong call. We don't want to do the wrong thing. We don't want to contact the wrong department or talk to the wrong person who doesn't have any accountability to what we're needing, and it just, it's kind of like walking on eggshells sometimes. So I am curious think about some of in your organization, ambiguous situations. What made it difficult and how did your team respond? Because I know there's a lot of it going in my organization, but I talk to students and my clients almost on a daily basis, and they are going through the same thing. And so I would be curious if you can put it in the chat, that would be awesome. What are some of the things that you are experiencing right now in your organization that, makes it difficult? And then how did your team respond to that? So there's some excitement. It keeps you on your toes. Yes, Donald, that's for sure. you know, exactly. Let's see, lack of communication, direction, or consistency. Anita, isn't that so true? And what does your team do about that? Because I think that is really key because in in our situations, because it's changing so much, sometimes the lack of communication is because people don't don't know what to communicate. It's not like they're trying to hide anything. They are just trying to go, God, today is different than tomorrow. That was different than yesterday. What am I supposed to communicate? And what is the direction? And your leaders and maybe yourselves are trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? Scope of work keeps changing. Yeah, maybe you get new leadership, and then leadership has new expectations. Your manager has new expectations of you. The supervisor has new expectations of you. And I'm going, well, I was supposed to be doing this. No, I'm not supposed to be doing this. Yeah, it keeps changing. Multiple reductions in workforce. Yes, Brandy, that's so true. Exactly. It's like create the fear of the unknown. Am I going to be next? Am I the pink slip coming coming my way? Which is huge, and that creates stressful working situations because if people don't have a feeling like, gee, will I be here tomorrow? Um, you know, uh, um, there's no security there, right? There's not a net underneath to catch them, or they don't feel like there is. Lack of communication, yep. Months later, communication happened. And again, because we keep trying to operate, I think, on yesterday's models, and and I went to business school, so we learned all the models. I'm not going to bore you with them, but the models have changed. Life isn't back there where we could just plan and plot our wonderful business models. And I think, the lack of communication a lot of times is they don't know what's going on. So how are they going to communicate to us, right? Clarity on role responsibilities. Melinda, that's so true. Well, what am I supposed to do? What am I not supposed to do? And people have expectations. I sometimes have expectations. Other people, well, aren't you supposed to be doing? No, I'm not supposed to be doing that. Or my boss will say, well, no, this is under your purview. Oh, really? When did that happen? And just even setting those expectations. So true, so true. Latency and awareness of the change. Yeah. And lack of input. That is huge. And we're going to be talking about that as a strategy, is bringing in getting feedback. If you can't put in input, it's really hard to understand or get buy-in or want to be part of the change. Oh, loss of focus. Yes, Princeton. Evidently, communication again. Communication's huge, and people aren't comfortable with, well, I don't want to just give them part of the message. I want to give them all the message. But the thing is they don't have the whole message. So it does take time because if you wait until you go, yeah, I'm sure this is it. This is a message, it'll be gone. And so how do we prepare people to just say, I can only give you part of the message? It's kind of like any project, actually. You don't know what you don't know, but how can we communicate? And what we do know, at least, challenge project will end up being delayed since it's not as easy as we thought. Yeah. Um, and it had to change the scope, which means more money, more time, more resources. Exactly. Expecting leadership to have all the answers, and we don't, Donald. Very what good. Yes. Yes. So there is an expectation that we may have to change as we move forward in this crazy environment, is that, you know what? We don't have all the answers. Together we'll get the answers, and together we'll work on this. And I almost think these days it's a more of bringing people together. We can't keep, and we'll talk about this, I'm getting ahead of myself, but we can't keep just having that hierarchical structure, and it's because we don't have the answers and we can't just, bring them all down. So I'll talk about alignment and convergence in a little bit, but that is so true. Many projects at once, lack leadership engagement, unplugged from the mission. Oh, ouch, that hurts. Um, Disinterest in owning the tough decisions. That is a big yeah problem. Team has lower morale, less motivation. Yeah, if the leaders, as leaders are not leading, nobody's leading. It's like I don't know what to do. Because we have a fear of, gosh, we can't make a decision because we might get it wrong. In this day and age, you just have to do the best you can do because your sands are shifting. Not enough worker bees, isn't that true? All that lean, lean and mean, as we used to say. Went through complete reorg, merged with multiple teams, so roles are overlapping. Yeah, and we haven't figured out, who's doing what, or are we stepping on each other's toes, or we have duplicate work. So certainly seems like no one has a plan, not acknowledging and agreeing that there is ambiguity. The first thing to recovery is acknowledging the problem. So, so yes, I love all of those. You are so right. And you can see that there are patterns even in those responses that, people are kind of seeing the same thing. So yeah, it is crazy. So, making decisions, your leadership or yourself as leader, it's like, well, I don't want to do the wrong decision. To make the wrong decision will cost the organization money, or it might reflect poorly on me. So there's that bias, there's that fear, right? And so, there's a temptation to say, well, we'll just wait and see, or we'll wait to get all the data, or, we'll watch what others are doing, what are our competitors doing, and so we're going, we have to look at speed versus accuracy, is it, and sometimes I'm not saying accuracy isn't important, it is, but you have to weigh the risk. We have to make a decision now. We can't make it next week. It'll be too late. We have to try something. And how do we learn to live in this new environment? And it's not going away anytime soon. It is just going to be constantly changing. And so we can't keep doing business as usual, making decisions as usual, because it's just life is different. And so looking also at the misalignment, a lot of you talked about this. It's like, okay, the roles, responsibilities, we merged. Now we're kind of doing, who's supposed to be doing what? Who's supposed to be accountable for this? Who's supposed to make the decision on this? Who do I report to now? Who do I go for stuff? I was just having a conversation on Friday with my colleagues, and because we've had a lot of reorg and people moving and who's doing what now, and so we finally, I asked my boss, I said, hey, we need a timeout. We need to talk because who am I supposed to go to now for this and, this piece of information, and what happened to the person I was working with? Oh, they're gone. When did that happen, And so it's sometimes coming so fast that, they can't communicate either. So those communication gaps widen. It's like, oh, well, when did this change? Or when did they get let go? Or when did they get at it? I mean, and then what happens is trust. Trust kind of goes to the wayside, right? And how do we keep trust in these ambiguous times? And again, we'll be talking about some strategies, but it's really about bringing, we all got to do it together. It's that community thing. So I have another fun poll here. What is your biggest challenge? We talked about some of the issues. Decision making's a lot harder because you have to do it faster with less data. Team alignment, making sure everybody's on the same page, and they understand their roles, their responsibilities. Is it communication or just stress? It's just like everybody's stressful, and then you get stressful, and then it's just it's weird times. So let me know what your challenges are. And again, there's no right answer. Just figure out what is the biggest one. What are you seeing in your organization that is the biggest challenge with living in our ambiguous environment these days. Because then we're going to talk about some adaptive leadership strategies after this poll. Well, a little bit of everything. How interesting. Decision making certainly up there, team alignment, communication. It all boils down to communication and how do we make sure that we're comfortable with communicating information that maybe we don't all have, that it's, and just being honest that it may change tomorrow, but here's what we have today, and being with the team. Yeah, personal stress. Thank you so much for doing that. Very interesting. I think that these polls are very similar to if I did a poll on all my clients and my students, it'd be very, very similar. So let's talk about strategies. What kind of strategies can we do to help have us lead in this ambiguous times? So what are some of those adaptive strategies? And so what we want to be able to do is kind of shifting from the problem. We just looked at what the problem is. Okay, so now, Susan, that's great. What are we supposed to do with that, right? And so here's the key thing, that leaders can't wait for clarity, but they still can create action, you know. And so let's look at, when we're looking at this, we're looking at adaptive leadership strategies. So when you think of adaptive, a lot of these are not a lot, but some of these principles that come from the agile environment, so if any of you are in an agile development environment, you know that things change. And so every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, depends on what your iteration, the length of your iteration is, you'd say, okay, let's reevaluate. Let's see what we have. Let's see where we want to go. The same thing, we can take some of those great ideas, which aren't original to the agile developers. A lot of this has been out there for years. And it's a compilation of, let's pick things out there that make sense to use. And there's been always an adaptive leadership component. And I think it's now that we particularly really need this. So as we move through, you will see some of that. So we really have to be flexible as leaders, more responsive leadership, and sometimes we may, if we're not a formal leader, I think we're all leaders, but if we're not a formal leader, we have to help our leaders too, our managers, our supervisors, how do we help them be more responsive and flexible? Like, hey, you know what? I know you don't know everything. I know we don't have all the data. What are you thinking? Because we do need to move forward. We do need some information in order to do our jobs, and really helping them empower the teams to do what they know how to do, and that continuous learning and an adjustment. You can already think about that, the agile premise. We learn from everything, and it's that fail fast, right? It's like, okay, let's get that. Well, that didn't work. Let's, work on something else. And that doesn't mean just, throw something at the wall and hope it sticks. But with the data you have, what is the best decision you can make at the time? And then get feedback and then move on. So our first strategy actually is get feedback. Short cycles of action, just like in Agile. Your Agile team is constantly adjusting to the sprint review. Now, I'm not even talking about software development. I am talking about putting those principles alive in the organization. Learn fast, fail fast. Keep the momentum moving. So if you make a decision, it's like, okay, let's check in 3 weeks, see how it did. Did it make things worse? Did it make things better? Okay, let's adjust. But then you also have to figure out, if you're doing Feedback is you have to create that environment for feedback. You can't just say, yeah, okay, I'll get feedback or I'll get data. You have to create a safe environment in which you invite feedback. You have to purposefully get feedback. You have to create feedback loops. And does that mean whether you send surveys out, whether you talk to your team weekly, whether you go to your clients for information? I would suggest a number of loops, but making sure that communication is open and being able to listen to the communication, understand the communication, and let other people know here's what we found out. Because that is going to help people be less stressed, help your team, go, okay, they don't know what they're doing either. Well, then you tell them what you know, and right there's a comfort level. And I'm not saying it's easy, but what are here's what we're seeing. Maybe we need to do some adjustments because yesterday's idea might have been brilliant for that time, but it's not going to make it to tomorrow. The other thing is decentralized decision making, pushing the decisions closer to the work. So this means no micromanagement. And I know some of you probably have those managers who, yeah, oh God, they love micromanaging, but they're going to stress themselves out too. If we push the decisions, that doesn't mean all decisions, but push the decisions about people's work to them. It increases speed. It also gets buy-in. It gets ownership. It's like, yeah, I'm in. Count me in. Reduces bottlenecks. It's like, what do you mean I got to go through 4 people to get my answer? As a customer, that drives me crazy. But also as an employee, that drives me crazy. It's just like, seriously, come on. We are too darn siloed. We can't afford silos anymore. We can't afford them because then the data, the feedback is not getting to the people who need them. And bringing in and pushing those decisions, giving them some accountability. Now, I'm not saying that they get to decide how to run the company, but I'm saying that give them some decision-making freedom to do their job the best way they know how. And getting feedback from them. And it also gets buy-in as you move. So autonomy, but clarity. Here's what your area, here's what you can do. That's probably not what you can do. So just making sure that, people know what to expect, kind of scoping it out for those of you in projects, what's in scope or out of scope as far as what people can do or not do. The next one that we're going to look at is clarity in chaos. Okay, so things are going to come fast and furious. We know that. We've talked about that. There's restructuring, there's layoffs, there's new technology, and then figuring out not only how to use the technology and harness the technology, but everybody's concerns about, hey, will we have a job in this next 10 years? So we have to define priorities really clear. So what are the priorities? Because there's lots of things going around. There's lots of stuff in the mix. If you're like our company, you've got, I don't know how many initiatives going on. What are the priorities? The other thing is to communicate. And even if you don't know, it's like, okay, team, here's what we know at this time. Now, it may change tomorrow, but at this time, this is what we know. People are going to appreciate that. People are going to have trust in that. It's like, you know what, if Susan would tell me if she knows anything. Because otherwise they're going to think about, if you don't communicate, they're going like, okay, what's going on? They're going to make up their own, because I've seen it before. They'll just make up their own stories. If they don't have the data, if you're not communicating with them with what you do know and then what don't you know, they'll make it up. The other key thing is providing clarity, chaos, align everything to the organizational purpose. And I should have actually had um, a poll question. How many of you could give me your organizational purpose? Um, and this is more I don't even want to say alignment, it's more of a convergence. It, and this is really a business relationship management BRM principle, which I really like, and I've been working on with others, my consulting clients, and talking to my students about this. But what if we converge? Instead of a line, because a line is kind of like, little ducks in a row, the C club does the purpose, and then what's the IT purpose and what's the HR purpose, and everybody just kind of aligns to which, I would have said that earlier too, but what if we converge? What if we all, as an organization, figure out how to fulfill that purpose, that we come together and create that purpose, and then align our personal purpose to the organizational purpose. So when people have suggestions or they're doing something new, or considering their priorities, does this priority make sense? Does it converge us to organizational purpose? So we're all moving the same direction. Not half of us are moving, to California, the other half is moving to Florida. We're all working together in one organization to help fulfill its purpose, provide and get organizational value from that. And that will help the clarity, because if we all know the organizational purpose, if we're all after the same thing, if we all know we're going to California, that is certainly going to help in that ambiguous time. We maybe don't know how we're going to get to California. Horse and buggy, car, airline, don't know. But we're going the same direction. And it might change. You know, maybe we got stuck in Kansas City and we got to find a different venue to get to California. But making sure that our priorities are clear for the moment, communicating what we know to date, and then converging and aligning on organizational purpose. So just a really quick question here. Thinking about what opportunity exists, because we all live in an uncertain world. What opportunity exists during this uncertainty? So I'm just curious, and just throw it in the chat. I just kind of, want to know what's kind of going out there. I think of comfort with ambiguity on a scale. The tricky thing is about communicating when there is ambiguity, is that this can paralyze or frustrate staff who don't navigate. So yes, we have to help them, and we're going to talk about that in our next section, is about providing resilience to people in this ambiguous craziness. Um, I love that, Donald. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so do people in organizations. So true, so true. So a chance to realign on clients and their priorities. This is a perfect time. It's like, hey, we want to get together. We want to know where you're going, how we can help service you. Greater patient impact. I love it. This is a time to redefine and reinvent. Yeah, Roanna, just exactly. So as much as this can stress us out, as much of this is craziness, these are opportunities to reevaluate, readjust, find out through feedback loops. What are you thinking? What's going on? Communicate the knowns and unknowns. Continuous learning, exactly. I love that. To understand instead of criticize. Brandy, I love that. Learn, rechart. Shaylee, that's great. Evelyn, networking, talking to other people, because yeah, we're not alone in this. And that is so key, that your team needs to know this, your colleagues need to know this. we can do amazing things as a team. This is not a solo activity. It's not a time for a solo activity. We have to work together. We have to help our own resilience and help others be resilient. Networking, yeah. Getting alignment from stakeholders, define and focus on the goals. Yes. And helping, your managers, your leaders above you need support and help too. And sometimes, you can say, hey, how can I support you? We have to get in alignment because people are kind of all over the place. So how do we do that? How do I help you do that? So great, great. Thank you for sharing. So this brings us to some of the questions you have is, talking about, okay, that's great. You have strategies, but some people are going to be better, more resilient than others. So now what do we do? Yeah, we have to build team resilience along with all this other stuff. Well, we can do the strategies, but we also need to help ourselves be resilient and others being resilient. And it's going to be different for different people. Some people may be really super resilient and they practice their resiliency skills, others not so much. And yet, resiliency is something we can learn to be better at. It is a skill. It is a skill. It's not something, someone was born with going, oh, they're just resilient. I can't be. No, everybody can be. We just have to kind of be able to move forward. So to build team resiliency, we need to normalize uncertainty. This is it. You know, Uncertainty is going to be pretty normal. We don't know what we don't know. Things are changing too fast. We can't plan, 10 years in advance anymore, or 5 years, or even a year. We just have to go with the flow and just say this is how work is going to be. Encourage people to be adaptable, work with people saying, Sally, that was a great idea. Maybe have people share their ideas, their resiliency ideas. But the key thing here is, as leaders, support psychological safety. When I was talking about those feedback loops, I was saying, here's the key. People are not going to give you feedback if they don't feel comfortable giving feedback. So then you'll go, oh yeah, everything's fine because we can't tell management anything bad. um, which that is not workable anymore. It's not workable. Now that doesn't mean we aren't respectful. We need to be respectful, certainly, but create that psychological safety where people feel comfortable at providing their feedback, at bringing up their concerns. People who are doing the work, end users, they see things that we will never see as leaders or their managers or their supervisors because they're doing every day. How do we listen to? How do we create that safety mechanism? How do we help each other go through that? So one of the things, of course, is maintaining that alignment, that convergence. Where are our shared goals? What is a shared mission, the purpose of the organization? Why is it in existence? How does my values and goals align or converge with the organizational goals? Transparent communication. Like I said, we used to think, oh, we can't tell anybody because we don't know all the answers. We just have to know now we're not going to have all the answers. Not possible. So let's be transparent. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. And then check in on people. A lot of times I'll work with clients and they pronounce this. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. See you later. And then nobody ever hears from them. You got to check in with people. If nothing else, you're going to have probably more communication or something more that you do know. But we want to be able to do frequent, hey, are you okay? How are you doing? Look for any resistance, look for stress, helping each other out in these ambiguous times. and then turning uncertainty into momentum, instead of, I'll just admit, I am a recovering perfectionist. And I don't know that I've recovered very well, but I am a perfectionist. But in these times, and with the help of my colleagues and my boss, actually, he said, it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be good. But there is nothing perfect because think about it. If I try to make the perfect widget or the perfect service or the perfect course or the perfect webinar, it would never go out because I'd always be rethinking that. Yeah, I wouldn't even be talking to you right now because I'd still be working on it. So sometimes we have to act before making sure that oh, it's perfect. We're not going to have it perfect. It can't be perfect. We have to iterate quickly. It's like, okay, let's try something, see, oops, we didn't think about that, or that didn't work as well as we thought. A lot of times, like, it looked great on paper. I don't know if you ever get these moments, but look great on paper, but now it's like, nah, not so much. Um, so we have to be able to iterate. It has to be good enough, have to act, we have to iterate, and then celebrate progress. It's like, okay, here's step one, here's step two, here's step three, and you take those little steps, and then people will say, oh, we are moving forward. Even though these, the sand is shifting, we are still making progress. We are still making progress. That alone sometimes helps people be a little less, yep, we're still moving forward. Our company's still moving forward. It's not shutting the doors. We are making progress. Maybe it's a one step back and two step forward, but we're still making progress. So turning that uncertainty into momentum to get people going, yeah, we got to get to California. We'll get there. So some of the things that kind of thinking about is ambiguity is in the environment. And I think it's here to stay. And so what do we have to do? We have to really apply our adaptive leadership skills. There is no other option that I see. I'm certainly open to some. So if you have some great, ideas, please pass them. But being adaptive in an ambiguous environment is going to be your best bet. That that you have to shift. It's not like, well, I said so a year ago. That the year ago probably made sense. Does it make sense today? Probably not, you know. And, so being able to be adaptive, be agile, realizing that you might have to shift, just and then just making sure that, you're moving forward, you're making progress, everything is in alignment or convergence, as I like to say, and everybody's going the same direction. So, action steps. Thinking about implementing a feedback loop, whether it could be a survey, it could be a time where people just, maybe at your team meetings, you take 15 minutes out and say, hey, we're going to get feedback from you. Maybe it's, and if you do agile, it's a retrospective, you know, and a sprint review, so you've got both the team reviewing what they did as well as other external customers. However you want that feedback loop, but be sure you implement something, because if you don't, you're not going to hear the concerns. You're not going to, so people are going to be stressful. They're going to not probably want to do their job very well because they're, and not going to be making good decisions. You're not going to be able to move forward. And delegate, maybe just delegate one. I know it's hard. I'm control freak here. Had to let that go too. So some things I can do, some things I can't do. That's somebody else's purview. But figure out, can you move some of these decisions downward? And you might have to coach them to make good decisions. You might have to do a little mentoring, but that will save you time, give them buy-in and accountability in the fact that, hey, I trust you to do this. Increasing the communication frequency, so because a lot of times we'll go, oh, well, a lot of times working on my projects, I go, oh yeah, I've got to do my communication plan, yep, I gotta communicate and go, oh, well, I'll just do it later because I have something else on my desk. And then, a week later, I'm going, oh, I forgot to send that out. Whatever you need, post-it notes. I do actually have post-it notes on my monitor to remind me of some things to communicate. Just because I don't want to forget it. I can put it in my, you know, um, Outlook or something too, but it just right there, it's always in front of me. And so just however you need to do that, you know, give 5 minutes to people if you have a one-on-one with them or whether you have a team meeting with them. Anybody impacted by all the change. We have here at Educate 360, we have a couple monthly meetings. One is for the whole company as a whole. The other's for anyone who trains is a facilitator. And that helps because then you can ask questions. They want you to ask questions. They'll present some things. There's like in our last meeting, well, we have a reorg, so now this is how it's going to look. Just kind of a heads up. Just figuring out how to do frequency, and you have to figure out the right frequency. Is it depends on how much is changing. Can you do it once a month? Do you have to do it once a week, every 2 weeks? And then on a mind shift, we can't do business as usual. It's not going to work. How do we need to rethink this? Some of the basic principles are going to be the same, but we have to think faster. We have to make decisions faster. We have to make decisions with less data. We have to make sure everybody's coming along. So with that said, I want to say, what are you going to try first when you get back to your real jobs? And Mariella was way ahead of me, already launched. Is it feedback loops, delegation, communication, or even yourself, a mind shift? And it's not going to happen all at once. Baby steps, but it'll get there. We'll all be more resilient. We'll be more adaptable. We'll be more flexible. And to make sure we're all moving in the same direction to California to Florida. Although I like Florida too, so it's not particularly one or the other's better. It's just hopefully you're moving to the right state. So with that, I'm just curious. Waiting. In the meantime, if you have any questions, we'll be doing questions. And as soon as the poll is done, feel free to start putting them in the chat if you haven't already.
Alrighty, and here are the results.
Feedback loops. Communication, mind shift. Awesome. Just something to think about. And I always find that if because I do listen to other people's webinars and once in a while I get to take a class but usually it's about reading something, but it's like, what can I learn from this and what can I start doing? You just spent almost an hour with me. I want to make sure that it was worthwhile. So where do you want to put your effort? So that you learn something, there was a key takeaway. So with that said, if you are interested, a lot of this is covered in some of our other classes, building resilience to change. I talked about business relationship management already, about the convergence and really needing to bring people together because we can't do this alone. This resiliency is not a lone sport, and neither is adaptive leadership. They're a team sport. We all have to be in this together to make it successful. And then we don't lose people. We bring them, we all are going to be apprehensive. We're all going to have stress. So we might be excited about it, but not everybody might be. It's just how do we how do we bring everybody together? It takes a village to get the organization moving, and especially in these days, we need each other. Expanding your emotional intelligence, making the right decisions under pressure. Not that we have that right now, do we? Effective leadership through coaching, being able to coach others. And then, of course, there's a lot of principles in this as well from organizational change management. So with that said, Mariella, do we have any questions?
I will go right ahead and give our audience another minute to throw any last minute feedback or questions. I did see this really awesome um, insight that I wanted to highlight from Deborah. I think of comfort with ambiguity on scale. I think the tricky thing about communicating when there is ambiguity is that this can paralyze and be frustrating to staff who do not navigate ambiguity well. Well said.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think that's true is as you communicate, is really thinking about, you want to be transparent, you want to be honest, because they'll know anyway. Um, and then, like I said, if you're not transparent, they'll just make up the data. And it might not be make up the messages, and then it might not be what you want. But you do have to bring people in and listen, and that goes along with that feedback loop.
Absolutely. Alrighty. We have a couple of thank yous and a question about PDU credits. I believe you can submit any like webinar or anything that you watch or any way you earn credit through PMI, but keep me
Yes, you can.
honest. Susan, awesome. Perfect.
You get one PDU for this. Yes.
Absolutely. And would this be ways of working?
Oh gosh, what are they?
I want to
What are the
say
three? I don't, it's been a while since I've
it's
done my PDUs.
it's been a
Um,
minute, but I will double check on that for sure.
yeah, Mariella will send it to you. We'll double check for sure.
Absolutely. Yes, and we had a couple of questions also about the slide deck. Yeah, you will absolutely be receiving a recording link to this webinar, so be on the lookout for that tomorrow once we send that out in an email. So thank you. Alrighty, I think that'll do it for us today. So thanks everyone for joining us,
Thank you. Everyone
and
have a great week
have a fantastic rest of
and
your day
practice
and
your
week.
resiliency. Help others.
We're all in this together, everyone. Thanks
That's
so
right.
much for joining
Exactly.
us. And as always, thank you so much, Dr. Heidorn. This was fantastic.
You're most welcome. Take
Alrighty,
care.
everyone. Bye for now. See you later.